Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
The house I grew up in was right next to a set of busy railroad tracks. You know, from my bedroom window, I could watch the trains just roll by. And you know, I found it fun. You know, the rest of my family, they ain't like it too much. You know, Mama always complaining and messed up her reading. And Papa always, he just mad because, you know, he tired of being by the train, man. It ain't like he be doing nothing but sitting around fixing on stuff all day anyway, stuff that ain't even broke. So I don't know why he cared anyway. But it was 3 types of trains. So that's how hard, I studied them so hard, I started realizing the different kind of trains it was. They used to go down them tracks, and still to this day. Now there was the long lumbering freight trains pulling boxcars, and it was the flatbeds, and it was the tankers, you know, which I try and count as they just, you know, chucked on by. Now then there was the fast moving commuter trains, you know, the Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, aka MATA, you know, or the M as, you know, some folk call it. And the Amtrak passenger trains, and they're breezed by, you know, heading to and from the central station into the heart of the city. Now when most folks see trains, they just see big old machines rolling down, you know, these 2 little strips of steel. But me, you know, I saw trains as a symbol of freedom, man. You know, a way to get me up out the hood, man. Something that could take me, you know, just way further than I ever thought I'd go. So whenever I saw a train, I would imagine all the places it was going to and coming from. And, you know, now naturally my favorite toys as a little kid, you know, it was the Thomas the Train, man. I forget. I used to love Thomas the Train, man. You know, this ain't even the story. This is real. I really love Thomas the Train and Gordon and Percy and Henry. Oh man, I remember it was this one episode. My auntie had Thomas the Train DVD, not DVD. VHS. Like, you know, this back in the day, man. And I used to go over her house and watch that little tape every I watched that tape so many times. And I remember all the trains was mad and scared because they had got this new train, and the new train was black. And every time the black train came onto the screen, like the music, you know, the Thomas Train music, dun, 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 dun. But when the black train came on, the music would be like, duh. It was real. Music got real serious when the black train came on. And he'd be pushing people and stuff and knocking the little cold cars over. Dang, I forgot about it. Okay, let me anyway. Back to the thing. You know, I love Thomas the Train, man. You know, I had all the characters, like I was saying, Thomas, Percy, Gordon, James, Toby, Daisy. I had all of them. Now, when I was 10, my grandparents bought me a Lionel train, you know, excuse me, a Lionel train set for my glow day. Now, to me, man, this was the bestest present I ever had, man. Like, it was just these 2 steam engines and 4 passenger cars. And there was even a small bottle of drops. And you put that in the smokestack thing, and that'll make the train engine that thing be shooting smoke out, man. Like, it was crazy, man. And I just spent hours watching that train just running a circle, man, or oval or whatever, pretending that it was real and that I was driving that thing through the forest and all that, passing the fields, across the mountains, through the little small towns. And I eventually developed, you know, other interests, you know, mainly girls. You know, I started, I was looking at them females after a while, man. But, you know, I still never lost my interest in trains, though. Now, when I got older, I applied for a job as an engineer trainee at Matter. And I got that job, man. And for me, it was a dream come true, man. Like, it was perfect, man. After I took the required, like, classroom courses and exams and stuff, I soon found myself riding in the cab of that sleek diesel engine that pulled the commuter trains. Now, the way the trainee program was set up, they had you ride on the different lines of the system for a few months with a regular engineer. Now, I've been on one line for a few weeks, and then I'd be assigned to another line in order to be familiar with all the different routes and all that. Now, the M has 8 routes, all numbered. The main line is, line 1, and all the branch lines, line 2, line 3, and so on. Now, me, I started up on line 7. The first few weeks before being moved to line 8. Now, line 8, or the Clovington line, as it's sometimes called, is one of the longest branch lines of the system, second only to line 2, aka the Miller Spoke line. Now, the first time I rode on line 8, I was with a veteran engineer named Hank. Now, Hank had been with the company from the beginning, when the old railroads decided they wanted out of the money-losing commuter service and handling all their locomotives and rolling stock to Matter. Now, we had the night hour service, which started at 7 p.m. and ended at 5 in the morning. Now, we picked up our first passengers at Central Station, and soon we was up on our way to Clovington. Now, as we were going down the tracks, Hank turned to me and said, it's something that you should know if you're going to be working for this railroad, especially if they decide to put you here on line 8 once they make you an official engineer. Now, when he said this, I got creeped out because, I told y'all know I love trains. And I remember back from when I was little, it was this episode of Hey Arnold. Now, most of y'all, probably all the 90 babies know what Hey Arnold is. Hey Arnold, the show with the boy with the football-shaped head. It was an episode where they was, where Gerald had told them a legend of this old train. And whenever, like, a certain night of the year or whatever, this train would come through, and the engineer was crazy, and he drove the train off the tracks, and he was missing an arm and stuff. Man, I remember seeing that as a little kid, boy. Whenever that episode come on, I sit there and watch that mug and be scared for like 2-3 weeks straight, man. Me and my little brother be terrified of that dang episode. Man, I still remember that to this day, man. So I'm like, I hope he ain't finna tell me some kind of crazy ghost train story, man. And of course, I looked at him and said, oh, no, I'm just playing it cool. I said, well, what I need to know? So Hank paused a minute to blow the horn for when we got to a crossing. Then he said, that line is haunted. Now, I was like, okay, of course, haunted. How the line haunted? Hank looked at me and said, well, it supposedly started with a curse. Back in the late 1800s, when one of them old railroad companies was building the line. The company built the line across the edge of an old farm that belonged to a man named Ezra Gray, and of course without his permission. Now, Ezra demanded that the railroad remove the tracks from his property and relay them somewhere else, but the railroad refused. Now, due to doing so, it would cost too much time and money. Now, Mr. Gray did try to sue the railroad, but he was unsuccessful. You see, railroads were quite powerful back in them days, and the railroad had a lot of politicians and judges up in their pocket. Then, to add insult to injury, Ezra not only had to pay the cost of court, but had to pay the railroad as well for the money they spent on the court case. Now, of course, this bankrupted old Ezra, and he was forced to sell the farm, minus the small patch of land the tracks were built on. And Ezra Gray vowed to get even one way or another. Now, when the line later opened up, Ezra stood on the tracks in front of the first train out of there. The engineer tried to stop in time, but Ezra was hit anyway. Now, before he died, Ezra cursed the line, saying that it would bring only death and sorrow. And ever since then, there have been a lot of mishaps and a lot of accidents on these tracks. And many people have lost their lives. Now, I believe that some of those who died haunt the different spots, and a few of the trains that crashed over the years come back as ghost trains, still rolling along these very here rails now. I looked at Hank as he blew the horn for another crossing. Now, I'm sitting here soaking up every line of this, man. Have you ever seen a ghost on this line, I asked. Plenty on, he said. I seen everything from headless trainmen to phantom lights to ghost trains. Now, I believed him. I believed him 100%. I ain't gonna lie to you. Now, we eventually came to a curve in the tracks, and when we came out of it, I saw something that made my blood just freeze up in my veins. So, now coming at us was the headlights of another train. Now I'm like, Hank, man, for God's sake, man, put the dang brakes on, man. Don't you see the other train coming our way? I'm just hollering, man. Now Hank was like, yeah, I see it. Don't worry, we be fine. I looked at Hank and was like, is you crazy? For we about to die. Hank just pointed out straight ahead and said, no, Hank. Get a good look there at that train. I did, and I saw not only did the oncoming engine had the shape of one of them older type diesels, like you see in the photos in the old cowboy movies and shows and old stuff from the 50s and 60s, but it seemed to be like see-through, man. Almost like a shadow with a headlight and lighted up cab windows. What the? I started to say, but then that shadow train hit us, man. Well, not hit us, but passed right through us. And our whole cab was surrounded by shadows and streaks of light. And it looked like, as it looked to be like a passenger train just passed right through us, man. I'm talking about, I seen like little pale figures of people sitting in the seats and everything, man. Now, soon it was gone, and the cab of our engine returned to normal. Bro, what was that? And Hank turned to me and said, that one of them ghost trains I was talking about. I said, man, what's the story with the train? Like, this just happened every night? Like, you just ride through this? And Hank just took a deep old breath, man. He said, well, it happened shortly after matter was established and took over them commuter rail lines. An evening inbound train had just crested the lone grade we on right now when it lost control and ran all the way downhill before crashing and piling up on the curve at the bottom. Everybody on board was killed, and because of that wreck was blamed on the aging equipment matter used back then. Heck, with only a few exceptions, most of the engines that matter got from the old railroads were 25 to 30 years old, and about 30% of the coaches used were even older. Not long afterwards, the ghosts of that train started making appearances along that, this here stretch of track, because one of them several ghost trains that haunted these rails. That's one of them right there. I looked him, I'm just looking. I'm looking at him up and down, man. Then I looked out the front window of the engine. What about the people back in the cars? Do you think they saw what we just saw? And Hank just shrugged his shoulders and said, probably. But I'm sure most of them are used to it. So I wouldn't really worry too much about it. Our conductor is probably taking care of things right now. We continued on to Cloverton and got in on time. We made runs back and forth all night. Several times I saw some of the scary things that Hank told me about. But I was relieved when we finally tied up in the yard, leaving the coaches on one of the side tracks and put the engine in the roundhouse. I was glad this day was over, boy. The next few nights, however, they were just pure hell, man. Every night run I had at least a few creepy encounters along line 8. You know, all of them with Hank, who would just shrug them off just as if it was nothing, man. But Hank was making that big money, so I guess he said if I gotta see a couple ghosts, that ain't nothing compared to this check I'm cashing, man. But I guess, 40 years and ain't none of them hurt him, so I guess you get used to anything, man. Now, after a few days, I was put on the day runs, which was a relief to me because I ain't have to worry about seeing no ghost trains or headless trainmen again and stuff. And I eventually became a regular engineer, and I was put up on the main line run. And now I'm pretty, content, man. But if the big wigs for the M ever decide to put me on that line 8, night owl service, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. I might have to, move, man. Go to that big city and get me one of them jobs driving for the subway. So I ain't gonna lie to you.
Chilling tales for dark nights.